Imagine an empire on the brink of collapse, its territories torn apart by barbarian invaders, its ancient glory nearly forgotten. The once mighty Roman Empire lay in ruins, its western half shattered into kingdoms ruled by Germanic tribes. But in the east, one man dared to dream of restoration. A man born to peasants who would rise to become one of history's most influential emperors. Justinian I, the ruler who changed the course of history and whose laws still shape our modern world. In the 6th century, while Western Europe descended into what we call the Dark Ages, Constantinople shone as a beacon of civilization. The city was a marvel of engineering and artistry, where Roman tradition merged with Greek culture and Christian faith. In this glittering metropolis, Justinian, the nephew of a peasant-turned-emperor, would launch one of history's most ambitious campaigns of reconquest. Picture yourself walking through the streets of Constantinople in the year 527. The air filled with the scent of exotic spices from distant lands, the sounds of merchants haggling in dozens of languages, and the sight of golden domes reflecting the Mediterranean sun. This was the world of Justinian, where East met West, where ancient wisdom confronted new challenges, and where one man's vision would reshape an empire. His story reads like an epic tale. A peasant boy from the Balkans who spoke Latin with a thick rural accent would rise to command armies that reconquered Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. He would build the magnificent Hagia Sophia, a cathedral so grand that it would remain the world's largest church for nearly 1,000 years. And perhaps most importantly, he would create the Justinian Code, a legal framework so profound that it forms the backbone of many modern legal systems. If you love unraveling the mysteries of great empires and discovering how the past shapes our present, then join me on this extraordinary journey. Today, we'll dive deep into the fascinating story of the man who dreamed of rebuilding Rome and nearly succeeded. This is the tale of Justinian I, the emperor who stood at the crossroads of antiquity and the medieval world, whose ambitions would echo through the centuries to come. Let me take you back to a time when one man's dream of restoring past glory would change the course of history forever. This is not just a story of conquest and power, but of law, love, and legacy. This is the story of how a shepherd's nephew became the last great Roman emperor and left a mark on history that we can still feel today. In a small village nestled in the rugged hills of Thrace, in the late 5th century, a child was born who would one day rule over millions. His birth name was Petrus Sabatius, though history would come to know him as Justinian. Born into a family of humble peasants, no one could have predicted that this boy would become one of the most influential emperors in history. His path to power began with his uncle Justin, a simple peasant who left their village seeking adventure and fortune in the imperial army. While many such stories end in obscurity or tragedy, Justin's tale was different. Through sheer determination, loyalty, and perhaps a bit of luck, he rose through the military ranks over several decades, from a common soldier to a respected officer, and eventually to the prestigious position of commander of the Imperial Guard in Constantinople. As Justin's star rose, he didn't forget his family back home. He sent for his favorite nephew, the young Petrus Sabatius, to join him in Constantinople. The boy who had once played in muddy fields now walked the marble halls of the greatest city in the world. Under his uncle's patronage, he received an education that would have been unthinkable for a peasant child, studying law, history, theology, and the classics in the empire's finest schools. Life changed dramatically in the year 518. The elderly emperor Anastasius died without naming an heir, and in the ensuing confusion, the Imperial Guard proclaimed their commander Justin as the new emperor. Suddenly, the peasant boy from Thrace found himself as the favored nephew of the most powerful man in the known world. But perhaps the most fascinating chapter in Justinian's rise to power was his marriage to Theodora. She was unlike any imperial bride before her, a former actress and dancer from the circus entertainments, with a reputation that scandalized Constantinople's aristocratic society. Yet Justinian saw beyond the gossip to recognize her brilliant mind and exceptional political instincts. To marry her, he even convinced his uncle Justin to change an ancient law that prevented high-ranking officials from marrying actresses. What makes this love story even more remarkable is that it was a true partnership of equals. Theodora was no mere consort. She was a political mastermind who would later save Justinian's throne during the empire's darkest hour. Their marriage, which shocked society at the time, would prove to be one of Justinian's wisest decisions. The transformation of Justinian from a peasant child to the heir of an empire wasn't just a story of luck or circumstance. It was a testament to the remarkable social mobility possible in the Byzantine Empire, where talent and ambition could sometimes overcome the barriers of birth. This farm boy from Thrace would go on to reconquer much of the lost Roman Empire, build the magnificent Hagia Sophia, and create a legal code that would influence law for centuries to come. It's worth noting that even after becoming emperor, Justinian never forgot his humble origins. Unlike many who tried to hide their common birth, he embraced it. He spoke Latin with the accent of his native Thrace throughout his life, a reminder of where he came from. Perhaps it was this connection to his roots that gave him the determination to dream so big and achieve so much. This remarkable rise from peasant to emperor would shape not just Justinian's life, but the course of history itself. It remains one of the most extraordinary stories of social mobility in the ancient world, proving that sometimes the most unlikely origins can produce the most extraordinary destinies. The year 532 began like any other in Constantinople, with the usual chariot races at the Hippodrome. The massive stadium could hold over 100,000 spectators, and the crowd was divided between two main factions, the Blues and the Greens. These were more than just sports teams. They were powerful political organizations that wielded significant influence in the empire. What started as a typical dispute between these racing factions soon spiraled into something far more dangerous. The crowd began chanting Nika, meaning victory, but this was no ordinary sports cheer. It was a battle cry for revolution. Both the Blues and the Greens, usually bitter rivals, united against Justinian's rule. Within days, Constantinople descended into chaos. The mob rampaged through the streets, setting fire to public buildings. The great church, the Senate House, and countless other structures went up in flames. The fire spread rapidly through the wooden buildings, turning the city into an inferno. The rebels even proclaimed a new emperor, and Justinian's grip on power seemed to be slipping away with each passing hour. Inside the imperial palace, the situation was desperate. The emperor's closest advisors, including some of his most trusted officials, urged him to flee the city by sea. They argued that all was lost, and preservation of the imperial person was paramount. Justinian, seeing his life's work crumbling around him, began to waver. It was at this crucial moment that Theodora stepped forward. The former actress, whom many nobles had once scorned as unworthy of the purple, delivered one of the most famous speeches in Byzantine history. Standing before the trembling council, she declared, "The imperial purple is a fine burial shroud." She went on to say that she would rather die as an empress than live as a fugitive, and that those who valued safety over glory were cowards. The effect of her words was electric. Theodora's courage shamed the men into action. Justinian, inspired by his wife's boldness, abandoned all thoughts of flight. Instead, he devised a cunning plan. He sent his generals, Belisarius and Mundus, with loyal troops to the Hippodrome, where the rebels had gathered to crown their usurper. What followed was one of the bloodiest days in Constantinople's history. The soldiers sealed off the exits of the Hippodrome and attacked the trapped crowd. By the end of the day, 30,000 rebels lay dead in the arena. The sand of the racing track, normally stained with the sweat of horses, ran red with the blood of citizens. This brutal suppression of the Nika Riot marked a turning point in Justinian's reign. Through Theodora's courage and his own decisive action, he had survived the greatest challenge to his authority. The opposition was crushed, and the emperor emerged stronger than ever. The message was clear. Challenging imperial power would bring swift and terrible consequences. In the aftermath, Justinian and Theodora set about rebuilding their scarred capital. From the ashes of the riot would rise their greatest monument, the Hagia Sophia, a church so magnificent that it would stand as a testament to their power for centuries to come. The Nika Riot proved that behind every great emperor stood an even more remarkable empress. Theodora, the former actress who had risen from the stage to the throne, had shown that she possessed more courage than all the noble-born advisors combined. Her famous words about the imperial purple being a fine burial shroud would echo through history, inspiring future generations with their raw courage and unflinching determination. After securing his power in Constantinople, Justinian turned his gaze westward, where barbarian kingdoms had carved up the corpse of the Western Roman Empire. His dream was audacious, to reunite the Mediterranean under Roman rule once again. What followed would be one of the most ambitious military campaigns in history. The first target was North Africa, ruled by the Vandals for nearly a century. These fierce warriors had once sacked Rome itself, and were known for their powerful navy that dominated the Western Mediterranean. Justinian chose his most brilliant general, Belisarius, to lead the expedition. What happened next seems almost impossible. With just 15,000 men, Belisarius conquered the entire Vandal kingdom in less than a year. The secret to this lightning victory lay in Belisarius's tactical genius and the element of surprise. The Vandals, who had grown soft from years of luxury, never expected an attack from the east. When Belisarius's forces landed on African shores, they found a kingdom ripe for conquest. Local populations, tired of Vandal persecution of Orthodox Christians, welcomed the Byzantine forces as liberators. Emboldened by this success, Justinian set his sights on an even greater prize: Italy, the heartland of the old Roman Empire. In 536, Belisarius entered Rome itself, the first Roman general to do so under imperial authority since the city's fall 60 years earlier. The moment was deeply symbolic. The Eternal City was once again under Roman rule. But taking Rome was one thing. Holding Italy was another. The Ostrogoths, who had ruled Italy for generations, refused to give up without a fight. What followed was a brutal war that would last nearly 20 years. Cities were besieged, countryside ravaged, and ancient monuments destroyed. Rome itself changed hands multiple times. The famous aqueducts, which had supplied the city with water for centuries, were cut during the sieges, and many would never flow again. Even as the Italian campaign dragged on, Justinian's armies pushed into Spain. They seized key coastal areas from the Visigoths, establishing a foothold in the Iberian Peninsula. At its height, Justinian's empire stretched from the Strait of Gibraltar to the borders of Persia. The Mediterranean had once again become a Roman lake, just as it had been in the days of Augustus. But this success came at a terrible cost. The constant warfare drained the empire's treasury and exhausted its population. Then came nature's cruel twist. A devastating plague swept through the empire, killing millions. Justinian himself contracted the disease but survived, though many say he was never quite the same afterward. Modern historians estimate that up to a quarter of the Mediterranean's population may have perished in this pandemic. The plague marked the beginning of the end for Justinian's dream of restoration. While he had succeeded in reconquering vast territories, holding them proved increasingly difficult. Many of these reconquered lands would be lost again within a century, claimed by new invaders like the Lombards in Italy and the Arabs in Africa. Yet the greatness of Justinian's reconquest lies not just in its military achievements, but in its cultural impact. For a brief, shining moment, he had recreated something of the old Roman world. His campaigns re-established direct contact between East and West, allowing for an exchange of ideas and culture that would influence European civilization for centuries to come. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this period was how Justinian managed to fund such massive military operations. He revolutionized the tax system, established new trade routes, and even smuggled silkworms from China in hollow walking sticks, breaking the Persian monopoly on silk production. These economic innovations were just as important as his military victories in sustaining his ambitious plans. The story of Justinian's reconquest remains a testament to the power of ambition and the price of dreams. While he never fully restored the Roman Empire to its former glory, his efforts would echo through history, inspiring future rulers and leaving an indelible mark on the medieval world. Did you know that Justinian nearly died during a devastating epidemic that killed millions of people in his empire? If you're enjoying this video, like, share, and subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel for more amazing stories. And tell us in the comments, If you were Justinian, would you have listened to Theodora during the Nika revolt, or would you have fled the city? While Justinian's armies were reconquering territories in the west, he was quietly orchestrating another conquest. One that would prove far more lasting than any military victory. This was the conquest of chaos itself, through the most ambitious legal project the world had ever seen. Imagine walking into the imperial law library in Constantinople in the early 6th century. You would find yourself surrounded by thousands of scrolls and codices, containing over 1,000 years of Roman legal decisions, imperial edicts, and scholarly opinions. Many of these laws contradicted each other. Some were hopelessly outdated, and others were written in such archaic Latin that even learned lawyers could barely understand them. It was, in short, a mess. Justinian recognized that a great empire needed great laws, clear, consistent, and accessible. He appointed Tribonian, a brilliant legal mind with an almost supernatural memory, to lead an extraordinary project. The task? To review, organize, and harmonize the entire body of Roman law. It was like trying to organize a library where every book had been thrown on the floor and mixed up over centuries. Tribonian and his team of legal experts worked at an incredible pace. They reviewed more than 2,000 books containing 3 million lines of legal text. They eliminated outdated laws, resolved contradictions, and arranged everything into a logical system. What emerged was the Corpus Juris Civilis, quite literally the body of civil law. This masterpiece was divided into 4 parts, each serving a distinct purpose. The Codex compiled all imperial laws still in force, making it easier for judges and officials to find relevant legislation. The Digest preserved the wisdom of Rome's greatest legal minds, collecting opinions from lawyers who had lived centuries before. Think of it as a greatest hits album of Roman legal thought. The Institute served as a textbook for law students, providing clear explanations of basic legal principles. It was so well designed that law schools used it for centuries afterward. Finally, the novels contained new laws issued by Justinian himself, showing that the law was not just a historical artifact, but a living, breathing system. Here's something fascinating. The team working on the Digest had to solve real historical mysteries. They found cases from hundreds of years earlier, where famous lawyers disagreed on important points. They had to decide which opinion should become the law of the empire. Imagine being asked to settle arguments between legal giants who had died centuries before you were born. The influence of this work cannot be overstated. When you hear terms like legal rights, judicial process, or civil law, you're hearing echoes of Justinian's great project. The principle that laws should be written down clearly and organized logically, something we take for granted today, comes directly from the Corpus Juris Civilis. The project also preserved countless insights that would otherwise have been lost to history. Many of the original sources used by Tribonian's team were later destroyed by time, war, or disaster. Without the Corpus Juris Civilis, we would know far less about Roman law and society. Perhaps most remarkably, this legal code would go on to influence virtually every Western legal system. When European universities began teaching Roman law in the Middle Ages, they used Justinian's compilation as their primary text. The principles and concepts it contained spread throughout Europe and eventually to the Americas. Even today, when a judge cites precedent, or a lawyer argues about property rights, they're building on foundations laid by Justinian's legal experts 1,500 years ago. While his military conquests crumbled within decades, his legal conquest has endured for centuries. It stands as perhaps the most successful attempt in history to bring order out of chaos through the power of law. From the ashes of destruction often rise the greatest works of human achievement. When the Nika Riots left much of Constantinople in ruins, Justinian saw more than devastation. He saw an opportunity. He would rebuild his capital not just as it was, but as the most magnificent city the world had ever seen. At the heart of this vision would stand his greatest legacy, the Hagia Sophia, or Holy Wisdom. To create this architectural marvel, Justinian chose 2 unlikely architects, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Miletus. Neither was an architect by training. They were mathematicians and physicists. This unconventional choice would prove revolutionary. These men brought their understanding of geometry and physics to create something that had never been attempted before. The speed of construction was almost as miraculous as the building itself. 10,000 workers labored daily, and precious materials flowed in from every corner of the empire. Marble from Greece, porphyry from Egypt, gold from various mines. In just 5 years and 40 days, they achieved what should have taken decades. The cost was staggering: 360 annual tax revenues from the province of Asia Minor. When Justinian entered the completed cathedral for the first time, the sight moved him to an extraordinary outburst. "Solomon, I have surpassed you," he proclaimed, comparing his achievement to the legendary Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. It wasn't mere boasting. The Hagia Sophia was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The crown jewel of the building was its incredible dome, 31 meters in diameter, appearing to float 180 feet above the ground. The architects had solved a problem that had puzzled builders for centuries: how to place a circular dome over a square base. Their solution was to use pendentives, triangular sections of vaulting that made the impossible transition possible. The interior was designed to create an otherworldly experience. Light streaming through 40 windows at the dome's base created what contemporaries described as a mystical effect, with the dome appearing to hover on a ring of light. The walls were covered with gold mosaics that caught and reflected this light, making the entire space shimmer. Visitors often reported feeling as though they were standing beneath the dome of heaven itself. But even mathematical genius couldn't completely overcome the laws of physics. In 558, parts of the dome collapsed after an earthquake. Undaunted, Justinian ordered it rebuilt, this time even higher and more ambitious than before. The new dome was completed in 562, and this version still stands today, testament to the improved engineering of the second design. The building holds countless fascinating secrets. The architects incorporated hundreds of jars into the walls placed upside down to improve the acoustics. They also used special lightweight bricks from Rhodes, said to weigh only 1/5 as much as normal bricks. The marble slabs were cut and arranged to create symmetrical patterns, like giant works of abstract art. For nearly 1,000 years, the Hagia Sophia reigned as the largest church in all of Christendom. Its dome remained unequaled in size for almost a millennium, and even today, engineers marvel at its construction. When the Ottomans conquered Constantinople in 1453, Sultan Mehmed was so awestruck by the building that he ordered it preserved as a mosque, adding minarets to its exterior. The Hagia Sophia became the model for countless other buildings, from the great mosques of Istanbul to Orthodox churches across Eastern Europe. Yet none quite captured the audacious brilliance of the original. It stands today as a museum, drawing millions of visitors who still gaze up at its dome in wonder, just as people have done for nearly 15 centuries. Perhaps the true miracle of the Hagia Sophia is not just its size or beauty, but what it represents: human ingenuity pushing the boundaries of what seems possible. In an age without computers or modern construction equipment, 2 mathematicians and 10,000 workers created something that still inspires awe in the age of skyscrapers. It remains Justinian's most enduring monument, a testament to the heights human ambition can reach. The final years of Justinian's reign tell a sobering tale of how even the mightiest empires can be brought to their knees by forces beyond human control. In what historians would later call the Plague of Justinian, a devastating pandemic swept through the Mediterranean world in the year 541. This was no ordinary disease. Imagine entire cities falling silent, their streets empty save for the wagons collecting the dead. The plague killed an estimated quarter of the Mediterranean population, somewhere between 25 and 50 million people. Among its victims was Empress Theodora herself, who succumbed to the disease in 548. Her death marked a turning point in Justinian's reign. The dynamic emperor who had once dreamed of reconquering the Roman world became increasingly reclusive and focused on religious matters. But it wasn't just the plague that brought the empire to its knees. Justinian's grand ambitions had come at a staggering cost. Think of it this way: every magnificent building, Every military campaign, every legal reform required gold. Lots of it. The imperial treasury was depleted, and the common people groaned under the weight of ever-increasing taxes. Farmers who once prospered now struggled to feed their families while paying their dues to Constantinople. Meanwhile, in the east, the Sassanid Persian Empire watched like a hungry wolf, waiting for signs of weakness. The very success of Justinian's western reconquest had left the eastern frontiers vulnerable. Those same soldiers who had triumphantly marched through Carthage and Rome were now desperately needed to defend against Persian raids. When Justinian drew his final breath in 565, at the remarkable age of 83, he had ruled for 38 years. The empire he left behind was a study in contrasts, geographically larger than when he found it, yet economically exhausted and militarily strained. Here's the bitter irony of his life's work. Within just a few generations after his death, much of his territorial conquests would be lost. The Italy he fought so hard to reclaim would fall to the Lombards. The Spanish territories would return to Visigothic control. Even North Africa would eventually slip away to the Arab conquests. But while his territorial ambitions proved fleeting, Justinian's true legacy lay elsewhere. The legal code he created would become the foundation of European law for centuries to come. The Hagia Sophia still stands today, a testament to his architectural vision. And perhaps most importantly, he transformed what had been the declining Eastern Roman Empire into something entirely new, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, a unique civilization blending Roman law, Greek culture, and Christian faith. This new Byzantine identity would prove remarkably resilient, surviving for nearly 1,000 years after Justinian's death. While he may have failed to restore the Roman Empire of old, he succeeded in creating something perhaps more remarkable, a medieval empire that would preserve classical civilization through the darkest of ages. Think of Justinian's legacy like a mosaic, one of those brilliant artworks that decorated his churches. From up close, you might see the cracks and imperfections, the places where ambition exceeded grasp. But step back, and you see the larger picture. An emperor who, for all his flaws and failures, left an indelible mark on human history. History often presents us with figures who defy simple categorization, and Justinian I stands as one of its most fascinating paradoxes. Here was a man born to peasants in a remote village who rose to become the most powerful ruler of his time, a traditionalist who dreamed of restoring ancient Rome, yet in doing so, created something entirely new. A ruler who sought to preserve the past but ended up revolutionizing the future. Think about this for a moment. While his armies fought to reclaim the lost territories of Rome, his legal scholars were busy creating the most comprehensive system of laws the world had ever seen. While his architects raised the magnificent dome of the Hagia Sophia, his administrators were building the foundations of a medieval state that would endure for centuries. Justinian's reign stands at a unique crossroads in history, the final twilight of the ancient world and the first dawn of the medieval age. His story teaches us something profound about the nature of legacy. While his territorial conquests proved temporary, his true achievements, the legal codes, the architectural wonders, the fusion of Roman, Greek, and Christian traditions, have outlived his empire by more than a millennium. Even today, when you walk into a courtroom anywhere in Europe or the Americas, you're witnessing the echo of Justinian's legal reforms. When you gaze up at the dome of any great cathedral, you're seeing the architectural influence of his Hagia Sophia. When you consider how different cultures and traditions can blend to create something new and lasting, you're observing the same process that Justinian set in motion in 6th century Constantinople. Perhaps this is the most important lesson from Justinian's life. True immortality isn't found in conquering territories or restoring past glories, but in building for the future. His story reminds us that the most enduring empires are not those built of stone and marble, but those built of ideas and innovations that stand the test of time. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most fascinating lives. If you've enjoyed exploring the world of Justinian I, please help spread the knowledge by liking this video and sharing it with others who love history. Subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more deep dives into the ancient and medieval world, where we bring the past to life, one story at a time. Which other great emperor or empress would you like to learn about next? Perhaps Charlemagne, the father of Europe? Or maybe Empress Irene, who ruled Byzantium in her own right? Let us know in the comments below. This is the Medieval Archives, where history comes alive. Until our next historical adventure.